These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it messed with me more than I expected. So my story happened a few years ago when I was 10 or 11. At that time, my mom and dad had just divorced, and my mom moved into a small apartment. The building had 2 apartments per floor, right across from each other. In the first few months, we never really saw the neighbor who lived in front of us. But suddenly, we started seeing him more often. I remember the first time I saw him. It was behind the building in the small garden. He was there with his dogs, and I don't know if I felt scared. Not just scared in a usual way, but this feeling like something was wrong. It was like he was staring at me, but not in a normal way. I couldn't explain it, but it made me feel uneasy. There was something about him, his presence, that felt strange, even though I couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was. It just felt wrong. A few days later, he came to our apartment and asked my mom if he could buy me toys and even underwear. My mom was scared. I don't really know what happened next, but I just know she kicked him out of our apartment right away. Then, about 2 weeks later, it was around midnight. My room was right next to the front door, and I suddenly started hearing knocking. But it wasn't regular knocking. It was like someone was trying to force the door open by jiggling the handle. It started slow at first, but then it got faster and faster. I could hear it, and my heart started racing. I was frozen in fear. I tried to get up to wake my mom or even just look through the peephole, but I couldn't move. I was so scared that my body just wouldn't cooperate. I know it wasn't a dream or anything, I knew it was real. I could feel the panic in my chest. After that, my mom and I moved out quickly, and we never saw him again. But since then, I've developed this weird paranoia that never really goes away. It's like my brain keeps playing tricks on me. I hear a little noise, and suddenly I'm convinced someone's in the house. I keep imagining things that aren't there, like someone hiding in the hallway, watching me from the dark. I know it sounds irrational, but it doesn't feel that way at the moment. It's like my body freezes, my heart races, and I can't move, just like that night. And it comes in waves. Some days I'm totally fine, and others, it all comes back, stronger than ever. I start thinking someone might come back. That someone might already be inside. Even when I lock the doors, double-check everything, I can't fully shake the feeling. It's exhausting, and I hate that it still has this power over me. It's honestly not fun. I feel ridiculous sometimes, but it happens out of nowhere, and I just can't stop the fear. It's completely irrational, but it's there, and sometimes it feels like I can't escape it. And a few years later, someone actually broke into our house. It was a guy who was drunk or high, and I don't think he had bad intentions, he was just lost. But that didn't make it any less scary. The paranoia is still there, even though I try to remind myself it's just my brain playing tricks on me. Anyway, that's my story. I know it's not the scariest one, and it probably won't be as interesting to others, and it's my first one, but I just needed to share it. I don't know how to get over it. If anyone has had similar experiences or feelings, I'd be happy to talk about it. Thanks. Story 2. He waited for her in the elevator with a pair of scissors in his pocket. I have an issue with writing novels, so bear with me. I hadn't realized I buried this memory until a weird trigger made me remember it a few months ago, and I can honestly say it was the scariest thing of my life and I think shaped how I see the world a lot more than I realized. I'll start with what triggered the memory. I was watching the first season of The Sinner a few months ago, and this happens in like the first 2 minutes and is literally the promo photo, so not a spoiler or anything. When the main character starts psychotically stabbing a guy, I got a very perturbed pit in my stomach. The scene is extremely disturbing and sometimes scenes just get to me, but I'm a rabid horror fan and typically am unfazed by these things. I've never experienced such a visceral, lasting reaction to a scene on television, and it kind of freaked me out. I watched a few episodes with my friends and felt panicky and trapped and eventually went home because I couldn't bear the feeling I had watching it. Then, as my obsessive only child Enneagram Type 5 self always does, I began obsessing over finding the root cause of the skin-crawling feeling I couldn't shake. I finally remembered it. I don't remember the exact moment later on in the show, but something triggered the memory of what happened to my mom and I when I was a kid. This happened in 2004 when I was 11. My mom is a paralegal and at the time worked at a family law firm. Something urgent came up, as is life in the legal world, and she had to go get case materials from her job that night, so she took me with her to go grab them. It was around 7 p.m. I should mention, I guess, that I lived in a fairly affluent, nice neighborhood where it was very safe and nothing bad really happened. My mom and I watch horror movies, so this isn't a forgot to lock the front door story, because hell no. I say this to give credit to my mom's insane sense of intuition that likely saved our life that night. We pull into the parking lot, and my mom doesn't get out of the car. I'm an only child, so I was reading in the back seat and honestly didn't notice nor care, but eventually I asked her why we weren't getting out of the car. She replied that she was waiting because as we pulled in, someone walked through the parking lot and got into their car right behind us, then proceeded to wait in his car while it was on with the lights pointed at our car. It wasn't overtly sketchy or creepy as there were several non-ominous explanations, but my mom had a gut feeling and I'm glad she trusted her intuition and proceeded very deliberately and carefully because it quite possibly saved our life. After 5 to 10 minutes, but eventually she turned to me and was like, "Okay, I have no idea what this guy is doing, so let's just go grab the stuff and leave." I didn't know this at the time because I was at this point mildly oblivious, but he got out of his car and followed us. My mom told me to hurry up because it was freezing, and we jogged to the door. Her building required a card to buzz you inside, so once we got in we figured we'd be fine. The parking lot we were in is giant and random people hang out there all the time, including myself frequently as a teenager drinking Four Locos in the parking lot. Classic, and he came from seemingly nowhere, so the chances of him also having a card to buzz in were not very high. This was also something I wasn't really aware of or paying attention to at the time. But a few moments after we buzzed in, thinking we were in the clear, he came in right behind us. I asked my mom about this. I didn't learn what happened until years later. I can understand why she didn't tell me, and she said a few things ran through her mind. He could have been a total psycho who stole someone's card, which was the least likely as it was just too fucking random. So, he was either an employee or a client. They held late-night mediation sessions inside the building, so it was typical to give clients a temporary pass for convenience. I'm going to assume this practice changed after this event. My mom, knowing the ID card system, actually wondered if she was overthinking it at that point, but she just had that gut feeling and stuck to it, and truly taught me from the get-go to fuck politeness. I hadn't seen him follow us in, and my mom honestly played it so cool that I didn't even put 2 and 2 together and just thought it was another random employee. But I remember just having a weird gut feeling that I just couldn't put my finger on, and mercifully I just shut up and followed my mom's lead. Before he came in, my mom was frantically pressing the elevator button just in case he somehow got in, but it hadn't come yet. So he came in and waited for the elevator for us. My mom was fake, polite, and said hi. Then when it came, he got in and held the door open for us, waiting. My mom really fucking killed it thinking on her feet and pretended to get a call and kind of shooed me to the side and told him, "Oh, I have to take this, so we'll just wait for the next one. Thank you," and ushered us away. I followed without protest even though I saw that no one had called her. After getting the weird feeling and seeing her fake a call, I knew something was up. That and he was extremely creepy standing there holding open the elevator. The second it took off, she immediately pressed the button so the next one would come down and grab me and said quietly, "That was the man who was waiting behind us in the car in the parking lot." He got out of his car and followed us inside. I was not letting us get in an elevator with him. When the elevator comes, we're going to run to my office and wait a few minutes, then take the stairwell out. At this point I'm freaking the fuck out but stayed calm and quiet and followed her lead. She saw that his elevator went to the 3rd floor. She was on the 2nd floor, so we wouldn't run into him. Even if he somehow discovered we went to the 2nd floor on a different elevator, her office was right next to it and he wouldn't have ever caught up to us. We ran into her office and locked the door and waited about 5 to 10 minutes while she held her ear to the door to make sure she didn't hear anything. As I'm writing this, I'm almost laughing like a lunatic because at this point we sound like paranoid freaks as really nothing has happened, but I'm so glad we watch way too many horror movies. We then unlocked the door and quickly looked out, then ran to the stairwell and ran the fuck out of her office, got in the car and drove home. That was the end of the story for me at the time. I asked my mom when I was a teenager if she remembered that weird time at her office when we hid in her office and ran away from a guy in the elevator and her face turned white, and she told me what transpired while we were waiting in her office and ran out the soundproof stairwell. The man in the elevator was there for a custody mediation session with his estranged ex-wife. He was against the divorce and was desperately trying to stop his wife from divorcing him. The custody session took place before my mom and I got there. He had refused to sign papers that would have awarded him less than 50% of their children living with them. He apparently got so angry that he got up and walked out halfway through the session. His wife decided to remain in the office for about 25 minutes after he left because she was freaked out. During this time, he went back to his car and sat inside it and sobbed. This was when my mom and I had pulled into the office building. He eventually grabbed a pair of kitchen scissors he had in the glove box and got out and went back to the building, which is when he followed my mom and I inside. I'm not sure if us getting out of the car kind of snapped him out of it and gave him the push, if you will, to go back inside. He came back inside at the same time as us and got in the elevator, which he invited us inside with him. Based on the evidence from the trial involving a gray sweatshirt, I'll put the links below. Prosecutors put together that he went to the 3rd floor and lurked around, waiting for his wife. He got back in the elevator and waited until his wife went to leave and get in the elevator. He proceeded to ambush her and stabbed her 106 times with the pair of scissors in his pocket. He murdered his wife in the most gruesome fashion. The details of the case are horrifying. The links are below, but fair warning on the graphic details. What chills me to my core is wondering what would have happened if we got in the elevator. It was clear he had an agenda and a direct target. It's highly possible he would have left us alone and went along with his plan. But the last detail is that while he was waiting in his car, he was snorting methamphetamines and was high as a fucking kite. The mediator was the key witness in the trial and her testimony is horrifying. Her husband also worked in the building, and she was walking to his office when she heard screaming. When she got closer to the elevator, she heard the wife yelling her name. She yelled out, "It's him." She found the husband dragging his wife inside the elevator with blood everywhere, all over the walls. Then, in front of the mediator, he continued to plunge the scissors into his wife. When the police got there, they found him holding his wife, who was dead, choking her with his arm around her neck. This all took place while we were still in the building. We didn't hear it because we were in the cement stairwell and ran directly outside. All of the above is to say that he clearly went absolutely psychotic and lost his absolute mind. Someone who stabs their wife over 100 times with a pair of goddamn poultry scissors is clearly fucking insane, but him rapidly continuing to murder her in front of the mediator and choking a dead body when the police arrived is a horrifying level of insane. That, and he was high on methamphetamines. There's nothing to say that we wouldn't have set him off in the most random way, or that he had already entered his psychotic break, or that he wouldn't have wanted to get us out of the way. My mom's actions likely saved our lives that night. She had a gut feeling and trusted her intuition. I read stories here every day, and sympathize heavily with them, of people, particularly women, who are conditioned to be polite and end up in danger as a result. My mom knew the fake call might have seemed like bullshit, but she did not give a fuck and was absolutely not getting in the elevator with him. She's not only my hero, but my best teacher. I learned that night to be hypervigilant, pay attention to every little detail of my surroundings, and to fuck politeness and never dismiss my gut. I will never forget the slightly too wide, toothy smile that didn't seem to reach his eyes, while he stood 5 feet away from my mom and I holding open the elevator. Now that I have had this memory resurface, I think about it all the time of what would have happened if we got in the elevator. TLDR. A stabbing scene in a TV show uncovered my suppressed memory from childhood where my mom and I almost got in an elevator with a man who had a pair of scissors in his pocket, who waited in the elevator for 10 to 20 minutes and proceeded to murder his wife by stabbing her over 100 times with a pair of scissors while my mom and I were inside the building. Links to the trial and murder details below. Rest in peace to the woman who was murdered. I think about her and her family often. We already met, but thankfully we'll never meet again. Enjoy life in prison. Story 3. The Birthday Mob. A few years back, I posted an experience from my youth on this subreddit. When I originally recounted it here, I was handling some personal issues and I believe it was reflected in my writing. The night I spoke about has distinguished itself in memory with such vivid detail compared to how it was previously conveyed that I've always felt as if I didn't quite do it justice. Though mind you, I am a harsher critic of myself than I ought to be. To capture it for posterity's sake with an added splash of polish and local flavor, I began rewriting it last week in a clearer authorial voice. You can find a link to the original recollection at the bottom of the post. I also decided to retitle it The Birthday Mob, as it doesn't arouse the notion that I was pursued by a band of animatronic creatures at a themed children's restaurant. At least, not quite as much. Once more, I hope that you all enjoy it. I've had a couple of frightening occurrences throughout my life, but none that have ever rivaled the distressing nature of one particular night during my senior year of high school. I had been coping through the latest in a series of breakups with my girlfriend and was searching for any reason I could find to leave my angst dungeon of a home office where I already spent countless hours dwelling on the end of the relationship. My friend, Mia, resided in a neighboring subdivision and had invited me down to hang out with herself and her brother. Since I had only been acquainted with Mia for a short while, my social anxiety urged me to forward the invitation along to another friend and frequent companion of mine, Robert. Mia had no trouble with this, and Robert seldom, if ever, required advanced notice for casual misadventures, allowing for his presence to be a guarantee well before asking him. Mia had conditions of her own, insisting that I call her to meet us as soon as we arrived at the transit station in her area. I had been to Mia's house once on an evening not long before where I shared in a politely tense dinner interrogation with her folks, and it was a fairly straightforward route from where the bus would let us off. The gesture never registered as anything more than a courtesy, and so I agreed unquestioningly, just feeling fortunate for the company. Robert had amassed a small cache of fireworks that he had been looking to set off at an appropriate time. Since that time never arose, I let him know that tonight was the night as I waited on him at the back porch by his bedroom. He muttered at protest, then immediately relented and snatched indiscriminately from the stockpile underneath his bed. In 20 minutes, a city bus took us through familiar haunts, eventually crossing over the bus trap that existed as an informal boundary between two communities on the northwest side of town. It was a tightly constructed underpass accessible only to public transit and compact commercial trucks, with a walkway protected by concrete dividers for bikes and pedestrian foot traffic. The central feature and origin of its name is a square pit with a loose arrangement of steel bars meant to ensnare intruding vehicles that didn't meet the specified requirements to enter. This was before the dawn of the sports utility vehicle would render them obsolete, and an automated gate was installed to continue justifying its function. Now a bit of an anomaly in its current environment, it still served its purpose and was akin to an unguarded border checkpoint. I hadn't anticipated going out that night, so when we made it to the station close to 11, I was consciously conserving my limited cell life to let Mia know of our arrival. The low battery icon flashed after the call, an indication that there was plenty left over to punish myself with the prospect of a reconciliatory message from my ex that would appear through the virtue of wishful thinking. As Robert and I warbled through a catalog of 80s tunes at vacillating pitches a beat behind tempo, a black SUV with tinted windows blew past us in the parking area next to the station. Its tires whirred banshee-like against the asphalt as it weaved erratically, the unseen driver beating out a rallying cry on the horn before tearing off toward the same inner-ring suburb that we were destined for ourselves. Mia and her brother arrived not long after, and we set our sights on a nearby schoolyard to cause a racket with some consumer-grade fireworks. In a fleeting spectacle, the twin Roman candles and a majority of the bottle rockets had been expended, with all but the few duds in the array fulfilling their advertised purpose of attracting attention. Another roving SUV came streaking down the road closest to the schoolyard within minutes. A collection of balloons tethered to the interior of the vehicle through a gap in the rear window battled the wind's thrust before the vehicle came to a jarring halt. Mia abruptly directed us to wait where we were and jogged off in the direction of the idling SUV. We witnessed a figure hop out of the passenger's seat to approach her. Though they were out of earshot, I felt a deep ease of relief as she received the greeting with "Plomph." There was a rapport and friendliness not commonly associated with the foreboding strangers that you meet after dark. Mia was the type of person that you couldn't help but like. She was bright, amiable, talented, and never did much to offend anyone. She treated everyone on equal terms, and her resulting popularity eclipsed the alleged social strata of senior high. I, on the other hand, was far more familiar with certain classroom archetypes than I ever would have liked to have been. The coaches, the bullies, the bad seeds, many of whom converged on a fixed point of our hometown's map, the apparent center of which was her former district school. In spite of its academic reputation, its student body had attained some degree of notoriety for its high rate of juvenile offenders. I was reasonably confident at this age that the flaring tempers between the respective cliques would simmer off after graduation, but there would always be those select few that would make illicit behavior and more premeditated acts of physical violence a lifestyle choice. I was, and still am to this day, a tiny man at 30 years old, never rising above 5 feet 4 inches and what you might conceive of as an easy target. The reputation I held in my own halls was one of a mischievous but good-natured slacker who could take a punch but couldn't throw one, and I relied on the more beneficial trait to compensate for my deficit of muscle mass when diffusing tense situations with somebody outside of my chosen circle of oddballs. It didn't have a foolproof rate of success, but it allowed me to skate relatively unscathed for most of my scholastic career. Mia and the stranger exchanged a quick embrace before their parting waves. I watched the SUV as it pulled a hasty U-turn, careening past a stop sign off to startle unwary pedestrians with its engine elsewhere away from us. Unprompted but desired nonetheless, we were provided with some critical context that was about to color the remainder of the night as soon as she reconvened with our group. That was a friend of mine from St. Francis. They're out celebrating his buddy's 18th birthday by driving around and beating the shit out of people walking by themselves. You're fine with me here, but I think we should probably head inside now. In the moments that followed, I took notice of how the lights emanating from the surrounding homes in the area had grown increasingly scarce, the parceled rations of security that they represented winking out of existence along with them. Fine by me. I'd rather not be elected the guest sacrifice in some kid's twisted adulthood initiation rites as he proves his machismo to his buddies while they trade turns packing my face in. When we got to Mia's house shortly thereafter without any incident, the mood had grown contemplatively quiet as we settled in, having had a light-hearted evening of adolescent memory-making spoiled by douchebags. Everyone was worn out, so we agreed to toss on a film, some inoffensive mid-aughts comedy that I can't recall the name of. Not even 20 minutes had passed in the runtime before Mia's father appeared at the living room threshold. "Mia, it's getting late. Say goodnight to your friends." There's been a lot of speculation whenever I've recounted this story over who was primarily at fault for the avoidable events that transpired afterward. Though I've heard accusations that I've been overly forgiving, I remain of the mind that everyone was honestly intended. Mia had spoken in our favor, citing the potentially dangerous circumstances that awaited us outside. Her father met these claims with a liberal dose of parental skepticism, while Robert and I advocated for our own well-being by sitting in abject silence as the scene unfolded. Despite the mild to moderate unrest from earlier, the sedating calm of lounging indoors on a sofa had a minimizing effect on the risks involved. I mean, taking into consideration how many dozens of streets this community comprised of, if we moved quickly and took precautions, what was the likelihood that these goons would ever catch a second glimpse of us? We dismissed it all as an exaggeration. She had made her best effort to explain our situation and dissuade her father from booting us to the curb, but as an honor student with devoutly invested parents, the rules of the household are inviolable. Bed by 12 and no sanctuary for teenaged boys overnight. There was no argument to convince him otherwise. As we were standing on Mia's front porch, she belatedly informed us that there were not one or two, but a total of 4 SUVs out on the prowl. After offering us her profuse apologies and well wishes, We reassured her that we'd be fine. She then latched the door behind us so we could set to recalculating our odds. My cellular battery had long since been drained, having waited for that text like the lovelorn sap that I was. Robert, on the other hand, had never even bothered to carry a cell phone with him, as he communicated with everyone he knew almost exclusively over MSN Messenger. Ill-prepared for the occasion, it looked as if we were resigned to traveling by foot. We paced about cul-de-sac, considering which routes would keep us from straying onto the main streets and arterial roads. The most sensible was also the longest, with the bus trap being a clean getaway from the birthday boy and his pals. We were fortunate to have gone to school in the area and knew of the many tucked-away corridors and shortcuts where ample tree canopies would be able to conceal us in shadow. We could stay virtually hidden for 80% of the journey if we used our wits. It's worth reiterating here again that we were remedial teenagers for whom flexing poor judgment skills was a respected tradition. We were also aware that the transit station would be shuttering relatively soon. While the train wouldn't be of any use to us since this particular station was the final terminal on the line, there was just a sliver of a chance that the buses might still be active. It was only a short walk back the way we came through a park overlooking the entrance. From there on we'd be completely exposed, with nothing but looming storefronts and a large, barren parking lot illuminated by what might as well have been the halogen floodlights that they shine on escaped prisoners as they rush across the yard towards freedom. We chose to hazard our bets since it was practically on our way to the bus trap, anyhow. Taking inventory of what could prove useful to us, I wasn't at all surprised to find my pockets empty, save for a wallet and the dead cell phone. Robert held a Zippo lighter in his possession, as well as a single remaining bottle rocket. Needled by a desire to feel resourceful, I scanned our surroundings before spotting a remodeled home with an industrial disposal bin out on the front street. I leapt inside and re-emerged with a wooden plank fanged with crooked finishing nails that I hefted in my hand like Buffered Pusser reborn. This failed to impose any profound dread, but I did win a derisive laugh from Robert. He gestured to me with his bottle rocket, expressing his desire to fire it into someone's face should they try and come near us. Now heavily armed and in much higher spirits, we skulked along the interposing footpaths between neighborhoods, which in hindsight did little to help us steady our nerves. Our courage, however, faltered at an intersection where a lone, dusky street lamp stood sentinel by a vestibule of low-slung branches so compact it was as if someone draped a shroud across the moon. Lifelong urbanites get to relish in the light pollution that paints our skyline, mistaken in the belief that even proper darkness has a translucent quality. And then, here was this one stretch of pavement so innocuous by day, restyled after sunset as a disorienting tunnel with the stark density of exhaust fumes. We crept in a maximum of 25 to 30 feet ahead before paralysis struck, the night's deserted ambience punctuated by the remote echoes of shouting, squealing tires, and the sudden acceleration of a vehicle. Only able to locate each other by our voices suspended in limbo, we agonized in whispers as to how we should proceed. Do we find an alternate detour or stick it out, listening for any further suggestion of movement on the other side of the emptiness? Beset with paranoia, the eerie silence it returned was a potent incentive to turn around. We briefly contemplated camping out for the remainder of the night before opting to double back. We subsequently found our way through the park exit to the main thoroughfare. There was little in the way of traffic at night, so if one of the SUVs were to materialize we would see them plainly, and they would see us. We strained our hearing for any trace of obnoxious motor revving before bolting across the road and past the parking lot to the transit bays. We hurriedly checked the posted bus times, but each had made their final loop ages ago, the station clock revealing what our hesitation had cost us. Diminished in resolve, we aimed to take shelter in the train terminal, which was typically left unlocked after hours. If we were to be granted any small mercies, the universe wasn't ready to let us cash in yet, and the locked station doors rattled in their frames as they refused to budge. Our choice determined for us, we moved on to the bus trap. Every distant noise provided a reason to flinch, never certain if it was a thrill-seeking motorist out for a joyride or the assailants that were preoccupying our thoughts. There was a strong possibility that someone had called the police on them or that they had driven off to avoid detection. In a cosmically just world, They'd have already been under arrest without their fatefully appointed rendezvous with a sorry individual who had the audacity to pick that night of all nights to take in the early autumn breeze. Maybe they had even grown bored with their party plans altogether. We started to let our guard slip as we neared our old junior high school, believing that the worst-case scenario we were on the alert for was already behind us, and I was still lofting around a cumbersome piece of wood like a full-fledged jackass. It was a welcome lull, but the effects of fatigue began to wear on me as the initial surge of adrenaline tapered off. Another network of loosely interconnected passages awaited us at the far end of the school, backyard fences exhibiting the scribbled handiwork of amateur graffiti artists beckoned our entry. Our off-property lunch breaks had taken us that way years beforehand, so we knew for a fact it had intermittent street lamps every 60 feet or so. Whether they were even operational was a different matter. As it turned out, this was a low-priority matter for the community. To my knowledge, they still haven't been replaced a decade later. Motion-sensitive porch lights would flood our field of view at blinding intervals, Robert all the while sparking his Zippo out of fitful habit to disclose his growing impatience with our inching progress. Twigs snapping beneath the paws of nocturnal animals out on a midnight forage aroused silhouetted figures from my overworked imagination, ones that reached out with invisible hands to seize their quarry and pummel us bloody. Finally, a steady source of light appeared ahead and we came out onto the street with that holiest of landmarks now within sprinting distance, though neither of us was feeling so athletically inclined. Cutting through an elementary school, our humor gradually returned to us, having turned a leisurely stroll into some clumsy trial of stealth. Compared to the winding trip we had taken to get here, full of retraced steps, dead-end deviations, and hesitant plodding through neglected footpaths, this last leg had been lit up like a runway welcoming us home. We slid back into our ordinary banter with safety on the horizon while I openly considered how long I would hold onto my improvised bludgeon before I discarded it in some baffling manner that a homeowner would try in vain to puzzle together at sunrise. As I took listless swings with the plank in my forward gate, a black SUV came peeling out from around the corner on the left-hand side of the bus trap, the balloons hanging from the rear window flailed backward from the velocity as the engine roared. Had they been waiting there for somebody this entire fucking time? It didn't really matter at this stage. There's no way they hadn't seen us. I cursed repeatedly as we dashed half a block in retreat, turning off onto the street adjacent to the elementary school. We both had to think fast as their rapid advance only left us with a rough 15-second lead even at the posted speed limit, and they had no intention of giving us any advantages. The front yards melded together, lacking any distinction between property lines, leaving us nowhere to crouch and hide. We could hear the vehicle gaining ground on us, nearing the bend. Our head start had all but evaporated, and I raised a panicked finger toward the only space that could pass for cover, a partial strip of flimsy side yard fencing. No accompanying front fence, no perimeter hedges, nothing. Ashamedly, I entertained the impulse of launching myself over the fence, knowing full well it would leave Robert behind. Thinking better of it, I sprawled myself onto the grass, hugging close to the fence with Robert following suit, long like boards and stiff as corpses, our respective implements at the ready, looking all the more laughably desperate than ever before. A loose copse of birch, a willow, and a massive pine tree was all that could shield us from an imminent beating now. The SUV lost speed as it made the turn, the headlights' shine intensifying as they drew nearer. We may have unwittingly bought ourselves the element of surprise without a clue as to how we'd properly exploit it. Robert uncapped the Zippo and nestled it close to the fuse, his thumb on the flint wheel. I attempted to press myself further into the ground, but the hard earth wouldn't give way. They came to a full stop and parked at the edge of the property. Next to us. The sleek chrome grille peered out from beyond the fence line. The doors popped open, gravel crunching as the birthday mob murmured indiscernibly and began pacing as they searched for us. I tried to gather a sense of the disparity in numbers by tracking their footfalls. My ear wasn't up to the task, but it was enough to know that the ratio was firmly set against us and we'd be surrounded if we decided to flee. I had seldom if ever swung a fist at anyone, always too busy with the illusion of composure to defend myself at the risk of looking foolish for it. At least then, being on a first-name basis with my rogues gallery of aloof tormentors was humanizing enough that a scuffle wouldn't escalate to injure anything but my pride. These people were strangers. They weren't aware of the bullshit persona that I affected, my ragdoll antics where I would swallow pain with a wry smirk. They didn't know I pretended to treat it as a game. All they wanted was to hurt us. So this was it. This was where I'd be forced to shed the layers of protective cowardice and earn my own fucking respect. I gripped the plank tightly, tiny splinters burrowed into my palm as I caught the sound of my thrumming heart rate. This helped summon 125 pounds of buried aggression from years' worth of play-acting my way through confrontation to outmatch the fear of a losing fight. My free hand fumbled on the nails as I pried them upright. I prayed that Robert's firework would generate a sufficient amount of confusion so that I would get in a few good cracks during the ambush before they'd have us back on the ground and ready for our ambulance ride. Even if I was only going to get in one strike, I was going to make sure it connected. But then, everything fell into a drawn-out stillness with only the galvanic hum of the nearest street lamp to add its supporting harmony. An uncharacteristic peace overtook my focused reveries of meting out a solitary blow of disfiguring bloodshed when I heard a frustrated voice lowly utter the phrase, "Fuck it." Slamming doors followed in the wake of this statement. The SUV sprung to life, the wheels skidding as they pulled out and sped off. Just like that, they were gone. The rigor of our bodies softened as we collapsed in place, not yet ready to sit up for fear that this might be a tactic. The longer we stayed, the clearer it became that we had been given the deus ex machina we spent the night waiting for. When we had regained our bearings and were ready to push ourselves up, we drifted along the side streets in relative quiet. We never wandered away from the center of the road. I haven't come up with a satisfying explanation as to what kept us from skulking the remainder of the way back to the bus trap. It just didn't seem necessary any longer. I suppose you can chalk it up to a symptom of trauma's insulating afterglow, though if you were to ask us then, we wouldn't have been able to process the shock and admit such a thing. It would live on as another treasured anecdote until the day that we could afford psychologists to tell us otherwise. We had almost forgotten to acknowledge the fact that we made it. From within our collective fugue, we glanced back down the road looking for some significance to the whole ordeal because it felt like the type of thing a person ought to do, but if there was any poignant denouement waiting for us at the end, it wasn't readily apparent from the other side of the underpass. If I had to shoehorn in a takeaway, it's that despite my aversion to conflict and the many previous assumptions about my yellow instincts, if miserable happenstance finds me backed into the corner again, I might just be able to stand my ground. I just sure as hell hope that there's some discarded timber nearby when that time comes. Story 4. I'm dog-sitting in BFE and the one neighbor keeps getting closer to the back door. This is a true story and I'm just getting into Reddit, came across this sub and I figured I would share. I dog-sit for a family friend. They much prefer to have someone stay at the house with the dogs. I grew up in a town in the middle of nowhere and I love the countryside. So for me, this is like a staycation, because I live in the city now and never have any time to myself. Anyway, their house is out in the middle of nowhere. When I say nowhere, I mean this place takes 2 hours to get to from my work and is about 45 minutes to the nearest town/interstate. There is one neighbor within 5 miles and he lives directly across the street. I'm used to this where I'm from. It's supposed to give you the space you need but also help you to feel safer knowing you have at least one person nearby. However, this guy has done nothing but make me feel unsafe as hell. So, I get to Terry and Johnny's house and they're telling me the drill. When to feed dogs, 2 super cute/spoiled Australian cattle dogs, water plants etc. Then as they're loading up their stuff to take it to the car, Terry says, "Oh, don't forget to tell her about Steve." John says, "Oh yeah, don't worry about the neighbor across the street. He's harmless. The guy drinks a lot and is a little off but totally harmless. Hell, the guy has lost his license so many times all he can do is drive a moped to get to town," chuckles and then stops smiling. However, just in case, this is where we keep the gun. Steve has 3 "Don't Tread on Me" Confederate flags and 2 plain Confederate flags, all of which are hanging from his porch. Of course he's a little weird. He then takes me to his gun and explains that it's loaded and if I were to use it I don't need to cock it, just pull the trigger extra hard. At this point I'm like, whatever, You keep a gun in your house when it takes the police at least 45 minutes to get to your home. Still, I've got no worries. I'm used to drunk weirdos. I know how to handle them. I love this life in the middle of nowhere, and I've got 2 protective dogs that will attack on a one-word command. So, I'm feeling pretty safe. Terry and Johnny leave around 3 p.m. I took the dogs for a walk and played some frisbee and began to unload my stuff while they're still worn out from all the running. As I come back out for my second load of stuff, I'm staying there for a week and need work clothes and my Xbox to keep myself entertained in the late evenings. I hear their neighbor, Steve, slam his door and seemingly have a phone conversation. I first just heard his voice faintly. Then he yells, "Where did you fucking go?" The dogs are hearing him now and starting to growl softly. I say, "Calm down, boys, it's all right. Just Steve, remember? He probably wants some privacy. Let's go inside." As I grab my stuff, I hear him yell again, "I don't care about my kids. Fuck you." And then I hear him throw something on the unpaved road behind me, turns out to be his cell phone. As I'm grabbing my stuff, the dogs start going crazy and run a few feet behind me, barking and growling viciously. I drop my stuff and turn around to see the neighbor at the end of the driveway, probably 50 to 75 feet, just staring at me. I yell at the dogs to calm down and to get back at my side. They do. I then give a friendly wave to Steve. In my head I'm thinking, this is kind of weird, but he's probably been drinking. Plus, they said the guy is harmless and I've had a dog before and never had a problem with neighbors. He then takes a single step forward and says in a manipulative-sounding voice, "You all right?" Steve is wearing dirty jeans, work boots, a dirty red hoodie and a red hat with the Confederate flag on it. He's also got brown dirty hair to his shoulders and a beard that's probably 5 inches long. "Yeah, I'm pretty good. My name is Pip. Just dog sitting for Johnny and Terry this week and ready to get in and call it an evening." With the boys, I look down at the dogs to see their reaction. They look like they're about to attack and I'd never seen them like this before. "How about yourself?" We sat in silence for about 30 seconds before he stated, "I'm asking if you're all right. I'm Steve." "Nice to meet you, Steve. Thanks for being a good neighbor and checking, but like I said, I'm good. Are you all right?" Begins silence. Now this silence lasts for probably a whole minute and I figure, he's wasted. I should just get inside with my shit. So I turn around and finish grabbing my stuff, and as I do I hear him take one more step on the gravel driveway. Dogs bark again. I turn around and Steve says, "I know them. These dogs won't do nothing to me. They are some damn good dogs, that's for sure." I begin feeling super uneasy. So I close my trunk and turn around to see if he's going to say anything else. I was about to tell him that I was going inside and then instead awkwardly say, He cut me off. "Yeah, what?" he yelled. I'm shocked and say, "Yeah, I'm going inside now. Thanks again for checking, Steve. I'm fine. I've got the dogs this week. Have a good night." I turn and go and the dogs follow me with no problem. Steve continues to stand where I left him for literally 10 minutes just staring at the house. Note, this house does not have a front door. There is a side door and a back door. The back door is the main door because the front of the house has those big green fluffy privacy trees. So I can't even see his house through the front window. You can't see either door from the street. You have to come onto the property to see them. It's about 6 o'clock and where I'm at, the sun starts going down around then but doesn't actually get dark until about 9:15 p.m. during the summer. Anyway, the dogs and I are on the couch and I've got my gaming headphones on while playing RDR2 online. All of a sudden the dogs flip their shit, running towards the back door barking and growling. I'm like, what the fuck? They don't do that unless someone pulls up in their car and they don't know who it is. I'm not having anyone over. So I grab my knife, which is always close by, and start walking towards the back door. The dogs are still going crazy and I have no idea what they're looking at. I don't see anything. But then I look closer. I see moped taillights in the driveway seemingly hiding behind my car. I then try and focus in and see that Steve is turned around staring at the back of the house from his moped, ducking behind my car. I get the dogs to be quiet and I hide to see what he is doing. The dogs are still growling, but at least they're not giving away my location right now. I watched him for 5 minutes. No movement. Just a creepy stare in my general direction. I don't think that he can see me, but I'm not sure. He then shuts off his moped and crouches next to my car, where I can see him now peeking into my car windows. When I lived in the country, I never locked any doors. Not my house, not my car, nothing. Since I work and live downtown, I naturally keep all of my doors locked at all time. I don't see him try and get into it, but he walks around it a few times. He's not crouching anymore. Obviously he feels like no one is watching him or gives a shit that he's looking into my car, but he is only taking a single step, stopping looking in my car, then at the house. Repeat. A single step at a time. Creepy as shit. At this point, I text Terry and tell her that Steve is doing some weird shit, and I tell her I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. I get a text back reading, "Call the cops if you feel unsafe. They know him. They can come talk to him. Remind me to tell you about the time he was standing out by the tree at 6 a.m. when I was leaving for work when we got back. We think he had a psychotic break." How comforting, right? So, I talk myself down some. This guy is just wasted. However, if he starts getting close to the door, I'm calling the fucking cops. Dumb idea looking back because the cops take so long to get out there. I'm watching him as he's made his second round looking into my car. He then gets on his moped and drives off. As he passed the window that faces the driveway, he sped up, trying to make it so I wouldn't see him if I were just watching TV. Now it's like 8 p.m. and the dogs start going crazy again. I look out and now his moped is parked in plain view and he is standing on the walkway just 30 feet from the house, staring and talking to himself. I had previously turned all the lights off so that he couldn't easily see in and see what I was doing. I see him take a single step towards the door. Now 29 feet away. I grab the gun. I've calmed the dogs down and they are in full-on protective mode. One dog to my left and one to my right. It's around 8:15 p.m. now and I call the cops. I explain the situation and that the owners think he had a psychotic break. As I'm halfway through explaining why I'm starting to fear for my safety, the operator says, "Ma'am, what is your address again?" I told her, "I'm sorry ma'am, but you're not located in our county. I will have to transfer you to county." "Are you serious?" The owner said that the cops in the south know him very well and know how to handle him. "Isn't that you guys?" "Yes ma'am. That is us, but you are located in a different county. That is not our jurisdiction. The guy who is bothering me lives in your county. That is why I am calling you." The operator then transfers me to another county. When she answers the phone with the average, 911, "What's your emergency?" I'm silent. I'm looking out the kitchen window and Steve has come up about 4 to 5 feet since the last time I looked out there. 911, "What's your emergency?" I then explain what's happening and explain that I was transferred because I am apparently not in their jurisdiction. She then tells me to remain calm and to turn all the lights on. I said, "Fuck that. This guy is waiting for me to do something like that. The doors are locked and I do have a firearm. If he enters, I will shoot." She then tells me that it is safest with the lights on. I turn on the lights. He notices, turns and gets on his moped and drives back to his house. I tell her what happened. She asks if I would still like to have an officer come out. Hell yes, I want an officer to come out. Apparently the cops in the south know him, but she transferred me to you. This is the third time he's come onto this property and he's getting closer and closer to the door. I do not feel safe. Someone that is not me needs to talk to this guy. Calm down, ma'am. We will still send somebody, however, based on where you are located, it will take a while for one to get out there. That's fine. I just want someone out here. Thank you. I asked her if she would stay on the line until he got here or nah. She says that one is on its way out, but she needs to be available if anyone else calls in. She told me if he comes back, and I'm still uneasy to call them without hesitation. Now it's about 9 p.m., and the sun is getting ready to set completely. Again, the dogs go crazy. Now I'm getting real pissed off and walking around the house with a loaded gun so that if Steve sees me, he sees that fucking gun too. I look out the window and see his moped, but I don't see him. What the fuck? Where is he? From the window in the kitchen, I can't see the back door. So I go upstairs, one dog follows, the other is too old to climb stairs, and peek down through the bathroom window. Steve is on the back porch lighting matches and throwing them down onto the wooden porch. He doesn't seem harmless anymore. He's talking to himself and twisting his head back and forth like he's getting warmed up to fight or having a conversation with another one of his personalities or something. I start filming him from the upstairs window. Just in case I die, you know? So that I could hide my phone, and when they found it, they'd know it had to be this fucking guy. The sun is down and it's starting to get dark. He steps up to the door and starts knocking. He then starts pounding on the door. I'm pretty good at staying calm in situations, but my heart started beating so fast that my Fitbit had to change my heart rate tab every 2 seconds. If he gets in here, I'm going to have to kill this guy or he is going to kill me. I could see pure hate in his eyes. Then he stops pounding at the door, quickly turns away and runs to his moped. Start it and take off faster than I thought a moped could go. Not even a minute later, the cop pulls into the driveway. I had mentioned to the dispatch operator that I have 2 dogs who will bark at the officer but will not attack unless given a specific word. They are trained and I do have a firearm. I will leave the firearm inside when I go to meet the officer. I met the officer. The dogs didn't growl, simply gave a single bark apiece to let me know that someone was here. I went outside to meet him and told him that the guy just took off on a moped. He says, "Oh yeah, I think I just passed him when I turned onto the road." I explain that he is absolutely drunk or crazy, and if he sees him on his way back that he should definitely pull him over because I'm quite positive he's under the influence of something. Normal people just don't act that way. The cop basically shrugs everything off and says, "Well, are you going to stay the night here?" I told him no, I will leave the dogs overnight and come back in the morning. I asked him to stay while I packed everything up. He nodded. I go inside, give the dogs love and treats and crate them for the night. I take off and return the next day with my dad. My dad begins walking the perimeter to try and show him that a man is also staying here. I'm a 24-year-old female, if you're wondering. Then Steve, wearing the same dirty outfit and hat, while holding a 24 case of Budweiser, is standing at the end of the driveway again. I'm watching him from the front window. I see my dad at the other end of the yard. As he comes into view, Steve turns around and walks back to his house. I later learned that Steve has been to jail multiple times due to domestic abuse. His kids are not allowed to see him due to his violent nature, and he bought a 4-wheeler. No one knows how he gets money to get these things. Terry and Johnny have never seen him leave for work. They've only seen him leave on his moped for 4-wheeler empty-handed, for an hour or two, and return with a case or 2 of beer. I don't know who he thought I was, but every time he looked at that house, in my direction, there was just pure hate in his eyes. Who knows what would have happened if I hadn't called the cops as early as I did. When the dog is sitting from now on, if a neighbor says, "Hi, let's not meet." Edit. Okay, so I was dog sitting again this past week. This previous story happened in May, and the guy came back. If this story is posted, I will be able to write another on what happened, literally last night with the same neighbor. Story 5. 2 years of hell. How I was stalked, completely betrayed, and nearly murdered. Hey everyone, this is my first post of an actual story on Reddit, so bear with me. I've been reading everyone's amazing stories for years, and felt like it was only fair that I contribute something back. Allow me to tell you about the time I dated a guy on MySpace for 2 years that nearly ended up getting my entire family murdered, me stalked by a psycho, and everyone involved nearly losing their minds. I've never written this down before or told very many people that I even trust. It's all just too painful and quite honestly unbelievable to tell often. If it didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't believe it either, but unfortunately it did. I promise what you are about to read is 100% the absolute truth. I hope y'all find this interesting. Let me give you some background for this story. I'm an almost 28-year-old gay male who was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains, which for my friends is not in America, that's in the South, more towards the Mid-Atlantic region. I usually don't just throw being gay out there, but it's important to my tale and to understanding why I made such insanely poor choices in my teenage years. I know almost everyone does, but this really takes the cake. Follow me back to when I was 16, just about 12 years ago. I was a junior in high school, had plenty of friends, and no trouble with bullies. At least not while I was at school. My parents are now wonderful people who greatly regret the way they treated me when they found out I was gay. At the time I hated them for being so horrendous to me, But as I got older I finally understood that their reaction was just a product of the strict religious movement they, and myself, were brought up in. Mild disclaimer, I do not have any hatred in my heart for any religion no matter what its views are. Whatever you choose to believe in is alright by me. I'm more of a treat people the way you'd like to be treated kind of guy. This just happened to be my parents' reaction, so don't judge them too harshly. Also, I don't want the comments to turn into a religious debate and/or LGBT rights discussion. This post is about none of that, it just so happened to be my circumstances. My parents, who at the time firmly believed that this would send my eternal soul into damnation, pretty much only allowed me to stay at our house a couple days a week after that. For at least a year I was living on friends' couches and off the kindness of their parents. I was in what I can only describe as the worst state of miserable, major depression I have ever been in my entire life. I had tried to commit suicide the year before with a very serious overdose that cost me 9 days in the ICU. I should have died, but your liver is an amazing thing and it started to regenerate on its own. A year to the day after that, literally to the day, the first guy I ever fell in love with was killed in a tragic car accident. My parents had zero sympathy for my feelings, they were the immoral feelings of their blasphemous son, so they didn't count I guess. I remember coming back home from his funeral that night and my father asking me, "Why are you so upset? Were you a fag with that boy or something?" I didn't even respond, just walked right past him and straight into my room where I proceeded to cry myself to sleep. Again, don't judge them too harshly, they were different people back then. Needless to say, this sent me completely spiraling downward in the worst ways possible. Drugs, alcohol, you name it, I did it. Anything to stay numb and keep myself from feeling the immense amounts of pain I was in emotionally every single day. To have your situation go from a year before seeing your father cry for the first time as you lay dying in a hospital bed, to him spewing so much malice and hatred towards you, let's just say it was enough to make anyone have a mental breakdown. I had friends who cared about and loved me deeply. I don't know why that wasn't enough, it just wasn't. I felt like no one truly loved me or ever would. Hell, if my own parents couldn't, then what were my chances with finding a soulmate? Would I just be alone forever and as miserable as I was then? At the time, and in my angsty teen mind, that's exactly what it felt like. Which finally brings us through my background and mindset leading into the pure, unadulterated hell that was soon to follow. In the midst of my deepest, darkest despair, the brightest idea anyone has ever had on this planet popped into my head. Well, if no one around here will ever love me, then I'll just go online and try to meet someone who will. Pure stroke of genius, right? It just made absolute biblical sense to me at the time. I felt like the only gay teen in the whole damn state, like the only person who really understood me was me, and only ever would be me. That in order to find someone to love me, I would have to search far and wide beyond the borders of the mountainous fortress I had resided in my entire life. Proud of myself for having such an ingenious idea, I immediately hopped on my MySpace, Facebook for us old people, for all you young folks saying, "WTF is MySpace?" and spent the next hour making it as badass looking as I thought I could. You could customize just about everything on your profile, so of course mine had to accurately reflect all my emo feelings and the darkness in my soul. Word to the wise, and something I wish I realized back then, if you're trying to attract the darker things in society, you're probably gonna get back exactly what you're sending out. I know I sure as hell did. It all started out innocently enough. I clicked on one of my gay acquaintances' profiles and for some reason this guy on his top 8 just flew right out at me. His name was Jacob, he was gorgeous, dressed in all black, and that was pretty much all I needed to know at the time. I saw he was from Maryland, several hours away from me but far enough to possibly not be like everyone else here. Far enough to hopefully have exactly the kind of mentality that I was looking for in another human being. So I sent him a message. Something lame to the effect of, "Hi, what's up? I saw you on my friend's top 8 and thought you were cute, so I figured I would say hello _" I wasn't expecting a response, none whatsoever. He was so gorgeous and seemed way too cool for me, so why in God's name would he message a guy like me back? And then it happened. Within a minute of me sending my message, I got one back. And it was from him. Not gonna lie, I exploded in joy on the inside, something that I hadn't felt in years and years. It was just something like, "Hey, you're cute too. How are you?" But it was enough to send me over the moon. I felt alive again, but what I really felt was hope again. We talked the rest of the day and night. We talked about each other, how much life sucked, how bad we wanted away from our hometown and our lives. You know, the usual for teenage gay boys living in repression. I fell for him hard, too hard. I mean hook, line, and sinker hard. We chatted for maybe a week before he asked me out. I had no problem with dating online. Hell, that was the whole point of me doing this in the first place, so I eagerly said yes. We had only been dating for a week after that or so when he introduced me to the rest of his friends. I met his ex-boyfriend Zachary, and their best friend Josie, who I quickly became best friends with, along with about 10 other girls and guys. Josie was a cool chick and she had known these guys for years. Who better to give me all the dirt on them? During the course of the next month, Josie and I became the closest friends out of everyone he introduced me to in what turned out to be a gang. They were mostly just a group of suburban white kids who called themselves the elites, and just drank and smoked a lot of weed. I had heard some crazy stories here and there about them beating people up and some of them taking the gang thing way too seriously, but I didn't really think much about it. Josie and I had been talking on the phone every single day, and really made a genuine connection with each other. She had my sense of bizarre humor, was extremely intelligent, and still liked to have a crazy good time on top of it all. During this period Jacob and I were doing great, but there was one little problem. I had started to fall in love with his ex Zachary the more I talked to him. Jacob could be intense and at times violent when he was angry, from what I had heard, but on the other hand Zachary was his complete opposite. He was too kind for his own good, an extremely caring guy, and he wrote the most beautiful piano music I had ever heard. Being a musician myself, French horn for 10 years, I was immediately endeared to this guy. The more and more time I spent online talking to Zachary, the less and less time I felt like talking to Jacob. Eventually, Jacob kind of figured out what was going on, and to my shock, he let me know he was cool with it and wished us the best. That's how after about 2 months with Jacob, I started dating his ex Zachary. This would be the guy I would date for the next 2 years, and with whom the worst times of my life would be spent. Josie was clearly thrilled for me. We still talked every day online and on the phone. Sometimes I talked to Zachary on the phone, but more often than not we just kept our communication to AOL Instant Messenger. When we started dating was when everything started to collapse. Jacob, who had initially said he was okay with everything, ended up exploding. He completely tore me a new one online, and then proceeded to go and kidnap my current boyfriend. Josie called me up freaking me the hell out, saying he'd taken Zachary and no one knew where they were. This clearly sent me reeling from shock. I guess all the rumors I had heard about Jacob were true, and now because of my actions the guy I'm in love with is in danger. I quickly contacted some of the older guys in the gang and let them know what was going on. Their response was basically, "Ah shit, not again," which caught me off guard. Again? You mean this happens frequently? I talked to Chaz, the leader of this gang, while he sent some guys out to deal with Jacob and retrieve my boyfriend. He basically told me in a nutshell that Jacob has been and always will be obsessed with Zachary. When he gets wasted on whatever, he goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and sets out on some wild mission to kidnap and apparently violate my new boyfriend. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in complete and total shock. But apparently the situation was resolved easily, and he handed over my man without too much incident. He also received a healthy-ass beating to remind Jacob that it's not nice to go around kidnapping people just because you can. This was the first, and certainly not the last, incident I can remember where a pattern I'm all too familiar with now would develop over the next several years. Jacob would get drunk and jealous, he would do something completely insane to me or my boyfriend, and then after all the freaking out and worrying was over with he would come crying back to me begging mine and Zachary's forgiveness. This became a weekly routine, and it began to wear me out mentally very quickly. Flash forward to around a year after I had sent the very first message to Jacob. I was still with Zachary, still best friends with Josie, who I had even been up to Maryland and met in person at this point, unfortunately to miss my boyfriend who was out of town visiting family, and was still dealing with Jacob's craptastic, insane plots to ruin my relationship and give me a stroke before the age of 20. None of this craziness set off any red flags in my head, not one. As a matter of fact, nothing during that entire year gave me second thoughts about anything going on really. That day-to-day the sky is falling lifestyle had become the norm for me and I was used to it. Several of my friends however had their doubts, though they were polite enough to keep them to themselves for the time being. This was when the first true danger that threatened me and my family ever arose, and it led to a night I will never forget as long as I live. Cut to me as a 17-year-old who in the span of 1 year had accomplished everything he set out to do. I had the perfect boyfriend, even if I'd never met him, didn't care. I had an awesome new best friend in Josie, we'd hung out a few times at that point and I adored her, and I had joined a group of my own in my hometown. My parents were gonna throw me away just because of who I loved. Well then I was gonna throw away every single religious thing I had ever been taught and go to the dark side. I became a Luciferian, otherwise known as a Satanist, and boy oh boy did I think I was a badass now. Now when it comes to the coven I joined in my hometown, that could fill an entirely different story in an entirely different subreddit. Maybe I'll post that experience sometime, but the point of telling you about them was so you could understand what happened next. I received a call one night around 12 a.m. from Josie who was almost beside herself. Very out of character for her. I mean hell, Zachary had been kidnapped over 40 times in the past year and she hardly batted an eye, but this was different. She explained to me that Jacob had really outdone himself and lost his mind this time. He had hired a guy from the elites, named Sean, to come down to my house and kill me plus my mother, father, and younger sister. My sister is about 7.5 years younger than me, and from the day she was born I have always been fiercely protective over her. She was, and still is, my beautiful, baby sister and truly the only one in my household that I loved at the time. When I heard that my ex had taken it so far as to hire a hitman to come after my family, I flew into what we around here call a mountain rage. It didn't matter to me if someone simply came after me, but to target my precious sister who had nothing to do with any of this was the boiling point for me. And even though I despised my parents at the time, I'm still a Southerner, and when you mess with a Southerner's family then all the crap you're fighting about goes right out the window, complete and total defend the homestead mode kicked in. I asked Josie when he left Maryland. She told me she found out that he'd started driving towards my house maybe an hour ago, and as soon as she found out she called me immediately. Okay, so that meant I had at the most 6 hours to prepare and at the least possibly 4 if he got a good head start. She also informed me that Sean was a former army guy, but got kicked out for failing several psych tests and being a complete sociopath in general. I'm not a big guy, and at the time I weighed even less than I do now. I was 5 feet 7 inches and maybe weighed 130 pounds soaking wet, but my first thought didn't require brute strength to beat back this attacker. I called up my coven leader Brandon who lived not even 10 minutes away from me and explained the situation. I told him I needed to borrow his favorite toy and I promised to bring it back in good condition with as little blood on it as possible. He agreed. About 30 minutes later I was back home in my room, cleaning and loading an extremely nice over and under pump action shotgun. Like I said, no brute force required. I called Josie back up and got the details on exactly what he and his car looked like. Then around 4 a.m. I told her I would call her back and crept out into my front yard. Now for people who had never been to my house, they always got where to park wrong. They always ended up in front of my house down a hill, instead of in the driveway on the side. This little detail was stuck in my mind, and probably saved my life. In the very front of my yard there was a huge oak tree that was big enough for my skinny, girl jean-wearing, emo ass to hide perfectly behind. All I had to do was wait and hope he did exactly what I thought he would. I got so lucky, he parked exactly on the opposite side of the big tree I was hiding behind. I heard a car door open and someone step outside of the vehicle, shortly followed by the unmistakable cocking of a 9mm handgun. While that sound may have struck fear in the hearts of others, it absolutely enraged me to the core. So I replied in kind with a sound of my own. As I stepped around the side of the tree, he was directly in front of his car, gun down by his side. In one motion I simultaneously pumped a shell into the chamber of my shotgun and raised it directly level with his head about 10 feet away from me. This caught him off guard and completely by surprise. I didn't hesitate, I simply told him the God's honest truth. I said, Buddy, you've got one of two options right now. Either you get back in your car, turn around and drive straight back to Maryland without stopping, or you can so much as flinch in my general direction and I will splatter your brains all across the great state of, insert my state. You have 5 seconds to decide, what's it gonna be? I kid you not, the most sickly smile spreads across this psycho's face, and for a moment I thought we were about to reenact the movie Tombstone. Fortunately, he had much more of a sense of self-preservation than I thought someone who just drive 8 hours to kill a family he never met would have. All he did was give a little chuckle and said, "You're a cool dude, see you around." He then walked backwards very slowly, my gun following him the entire way, got back into his car and just drove off. Right then and there I made up my mind. I had to tackle the beast head-on. I was always raised that if you have a problem, be a damn man and take care of it yourself. I had to go to my enemy Jacob's home turf and bring this war to his doorstep just like he brought it to mine. It was time to go to Maryland. Edit. I didn't realize you couldn't make anything a series on Alanim, so I'll attempt to sum up the next year of this chaos below here. After all the drama of nearly being murdered by a nut job, I'd really had enough of Jacob's BS at this point. I got online and cussed him out until a fly wouldn't land on him, making a point to let him know that his little plan backfired. He wasn't dealing with some poor little boy that couldn't find for himself, and each and every crazy situation that evolved had made me stronger as a person, if not a little bit more mentally disturbed every time. I told him he was going to regret the day he ever crossed me and my boyfriend. Instead of apologizing like usual, his true colors finally came out. He laughed at me. He freaking laughed at me. He told me I was cute when I was angry, and said what a damn shame it was that I didn't have a bullet hole in my head. He wished I was dead and that he never spoke to me in the first place, because he was still in love, more like insanely obsessed, with his ex, my current boyfriend of a year, Zachary. He informed me that the war was just beginning, and he would do everything in his power to win Zachary back like he was some kind of adorable trophy you won for baking the best freaking pie at the county fair. I was incensed, completely livid and brimming to the edge with fury. I told him to watch his back because I'm coming for him. I called Josie and told her everything that happened and asked if I could come stay with her for a week. She excitedly agreed. Zachary was asleep for this whole ordeal and blissfully unaware that anything had happened. When he found out the next day, I think he was even more angry than I was. Fortunately for us, the gang's leader Chaz liked Zachary a whole hell of a lot more than he did Jacob. So we hatched a plan with him. The idea was for them to kidnap Jacob like he had Zachary so many times before. They would be accomplishing this task while I was on my way up to Maryland, and when I got there he would be mine to do with as I pleased. You can imagine on the 8-hour drive up there all the hideous and heinously brutal ideas that were going through my mind. I was going to inflict maximum amounts of pain on the guy that had caused so much in my own life, and I would relish every second of it. Unfortunately, or fortunately depending on how you look at it, my dreams of reviving the Spanish Inquisition on my ex's head never came to fruition. When I arrived in Maryland, Josie came skipping out to greet me, happy as a lark like always to see me. She had some good and bad news. I always ask for the bad news first, and the bad news was that Jacob had gotten tipped off by Kenny. God, I freaking loathe that guy, always meddling where he didn't belong, that everyone was coming for him. He made a hasty retreat and had intended to kidnap Zachary and take him on the run too. But that was the good news. Before he could get to him, Zachary had hopped on a bus and headed to New York to stay with his mom while things cooled off. As sad as I was that once again I had missed seeing him for the first time, I was just relieved he was out of harm's way. Safe and sound. Again, no alarm bells going off that for the second time that I had made the trip up there, Zachary was not around. Josie called him on her cell and he apparently picked up his mom's, because he never had his own cell, and we got to enjoy one of the rare times we actually spoke on the phone. All was well, now for a week of fun and plotting on what we were going to do to Jacob the next time he reared his ugly head. Later on that week, Josie wanted to drive down to an old colonial part of Maryland and go ghost hunting on these abandoned railroad tracks. However uneventful that may have been, we did end up inviting Sean to go with us. Turns out Psycho Dude actually felt bad. Well, almost. He blankly told me that if I didn't have the balls to stand up to him, he would have killed me and my whole family for just $500. Instead of killing him on the spot, which every fiber in my being was telling me to do, I decided to play nice and get him on my side. That way, if Jacob ever tried that crap again, he would definitely tell him no because I'm the cool dude. Sometimes you catch more flies with honey. Anyways, the rest of the week was normal and a damn good time. Josie and I said our goodbyes and we parted ways wishing each other a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. The next couple of weeks were semi-normal, no word from Jacob at all. Not even a peep. What a gift, I thought, I'll take it. Year 2 of my relationship began quite happily, believe it or not. Even my birthday month of January was an unusually good one. Then came the next couple months, 2 months which quite vividly live within me to this day. They also define my life for the next several years. This is when the sky stopped falling, and my world completely crumbled from beneath me into utter devastation. At the beginning of February, Josie had a sudden and urgent impulse to get away from her parents. Now I could completely understand that, so I happily agreed to let her come stay down south with me. I borrowed my best friend's car and drove a 15 to 16 some odd hour round trip all the way to Maryland and back. My parents were less than thrilled. They told me she couldn't live in the house with us. So I said fine, and shelled out my own money to a local La Quinta in where she and I lived for almost 2 weeks before my parents caved and let us back in my house. Now I forgot to mention something extremely important earlier about my boyfriend Zachary. He was very sick, terminally ill, but we thought it wouldn't be for years. I was told he had cystic fibrosis and he needed a double lung transplant in order to live much longer. He was hospitalized in the beginning of February and rushed up the transplant list because his condition was so grave. I can't even begin to tell you how after the year we'd been through together how badly I wanted to be by his side. Unfortunately, he was at a hospital in a part of the country that specializes in treating CF and was way too far for me to travel. Josie kept me in pretty good spirits about the whole thing. She had a lot of experience with CF since her sister died from it several years earlier. She reassured me that since he was so young and tried to take such good care of himself, that he would probably receive donor lungs very soon and be just fine. I tried not to worry too much, but in reality I worried my ass off. Losing him after getting him out of harm's way so many times before was not an option in my mind. How could we have overcome so much only for him to succumb to this disease? Zachary and I talked constantly when he felt like it, and even though he was scared and alone, he said he felt like $1,000,000 knowing I was supporting him with my love no matter where I was. That made me feel wonderful being able to comfort him from so far away, and for a couple weeks my comfort seemed to be doing the trick. Until one day. That day, my boyfriend died suddenly on February 14, 2008. His lungs filled with fluid, he suffocated and died. There was nothing anyone could do. I was completely and totally lost. Josie broke the news and I collapsed into the biggest mess you've ever seen in your life. She was still living with me at the time, so she tried to console me as best as she could, while she was shedding her own tears at the loss of her best friend. That forever ruined Valentine's Day for me. To this day it only reminds me of loss and death. You don't realize how fragile your heart truly is until you've experienced a loss like that. Little did I know that even worse moments in my life were about to occur a month later. I was headed on a course for total destruction, and still blissfully unaware of the one person who had been driving this crazy train from day one. Skip forward to March, St. Patrick's Day to be exact, a little over a month since Zachary had passed away. Josie had forcefully been returned to Maryland by her parents, seeing as how she had practically ran away. I was off in a la-la land of booze, drugs, and more pain than either of those could cover up. I was chilling with my Satanist posse doing what all normal American teenagers do on St. Patty's Day, pretending like we're Irish and testing the limits of alcohol poisoning. My alcohol tolerance back then was ridiculously high, so I had already drank an inordinate amount when my phone rang. It was Josie. I slurred my words as something to the effect of, "Hey girl, washun," came bumbling out of my mouth. I announced to the room it was Josie, to which everyone replied, "Hey." She had lived with us for several months, and love her or hate her, she'd become an honorary Southerner. The next words out of her mouth once again sent my head spinning off into space and my world into complete chaos. Zachary's not dead. I stopped breathing for a moment, and when I caught my breath I asked her to repeat that again. She did. Except this time she added the fact that his life had been in danger blah blah, so he had to hide even from me blah blah. Jacob just had to think he was dead blah blah. I could literally feel my brain dripping out from my ears as my mind turned into mush with every word out of her mouth. Then for the real kicker to my drunken mental meltdown, Zachary got on the phone. Sure enough, it was his voice. He apologized for what he had to do. I apologized for what I was about to do, which was scream and yell my lungs out, throw my phone into a wall smashing it into a million pieces, and then proceed to go from being super hammered drunk to completely wasted. I drank everything that wasn't nailed down. Who knows what other drugs I did on top of that because I sure don't remember. I was literally having a complete and total mental breakdown. The last strand of sanity in my brain just snapped. I did this for a couple more hours until I somehow drove back home, put on my work clothes, and tore out of the parking lot to go to my job in a city half an hour down the interstate with people chasing me trying to stop me. I don't recall any of what happened next, but apparently this is what I did. I showed up to work completely wasted and got fired from a damn good job. I called my father freaking out in the parking lot of said job. He realized I was drunk and told me to stay there and he would come get me. Oh, how I wish crazy, drunk me would have listened. Instead of doing that, I started driving on the interstate again, not caring if I lived or died. And obviously not caring about anyone else. According to the police report, I was tearing down the interstate at 130 miles per hour. I apparently hit 2-mile markers on the side of the road and blew both my right-hand tires, but continued on driving with sparks shooting 50 feet out of the back of my car. I took the exit to the hospital going that fast and spun out / completely totaled what was left of my car. According to bystanders, I then proceeded to exit my vehicle and run across the damn interstate towards the hospital with people chasing after me. Once I got to their doors, I heard the now familiar whoop wop of a police cruiser. I was so arrested for driving under the influence. I blew a .20 about 12 hours after I had my last drink. If I had blown a .21, I would have gotten a felony charge. That led to years of failed drug tests, violated probations, and ultimately a year in jail down the line. After that, I decided enough was enough. These crazy people from Maryland and their insane concept of living could all go to hell as far as I was concerned. It had been nearly 2 years of torment, fear, and unimaginable pain. Worst of all, it was starting to cost me my mind and my freedom. I was done listening to Josie and ready to start listening to my actual friends in town who had been begging me to stay away from those people for a long time now. Some good friends set me down and started to tell me the inconsistencies in all their stories over the last few years. At first I didn't want to listen, but then eventually there was too much evidence not to listen. Finally I opened my ears and my mind to what was really going on. I decided to figure this out once and for all. I got on MySpace, Facebook, and every other social media I could think of. I typed in Josie's full name into the search bar of every single one. What I found to this day still makes me want to turn my stomach contents inside out. They're on every social media possible. By using her name and the few email addresses I knew she had, I found dozens and dozens of accounts linked to her emails. Duplicate after duplicate of Zachary's full name on accounts with pictures of her, and the same thing with Jacob and every single solitary other person in the supposed elites. That's when it finally, after years of denial and torment, finally freaking hit me like a railroad car full of bricks. Holy sh*t. She's every single one of these people. She absolutely and unequivocally made up every single solitary one of these people and has been pretending to be a dozen or more people for over 2 years. As you can imagine, my jaw hit the damn floor. Thank God I had some close friends there who kept me from falling apart and helped me find every single fake profile she had ever created. I was dumbfounded. Profile after profile after profile that had her pictures but the names of people I thought were entirely real. Prototype accounts before she ended up making the actual fake accounts. Gag or jokes to her really. In fact, all of this had to be one big, insane, psychotic joke. I was too shocked to be enraged yet, but don't worry, that's coming. I diligently copied every link to every single one of her profiles into my AOL Instant Messenger, then I called her. Hey, how are ya? I'm alright, I guess, just bored. You? Nope. Definitely not bored over here. Get on chat and I'll show you something really interesting. I was nearly hysterical at that point and I could tell she knew something was up. Once she was online, I simply asked her, "Hey Josie, what are these?" Then sended her the link to every single fake profile she had ever created in her miserable life, and a few from email accounts I didn't even know belonged to her. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening as I heard her clicking through link after link. Her 2-year-long mental game was over and she finally realized it. Her words? "Well, fuck man. Guess you got me." She then started to laugh, genuinely laughing as though something remotely funny had just occurred. I don't recall what I said, but apparently it was bad enough for my friends to take away the phone and have to hold me down. Catfish, the show or movie, wasn't around way back then, so I had unwittingly become one of the first hardcore victims of a stalker in the internet age. Worse than that, I had talked to, lived with, and even befriended the girl who had been stalking and trying to ruin my life for over 2 years. It was literally, and still is, the single biggest mind f*** I have ever had in my entire life. Thousands upon thousands of messenger conversations, hundreds and thousands of hours of phone conversation, countless amounts of cash being spent to drive up several states away just to stay with my psycho stalker every single time, even bringing her down to live with me for months, having $5,000 mysteriously vanished out of my bank account. Everything was starting to make sense. There was no Jacob, there was no Zachary, there was no gang. What there actually was one completely brash, insane girl with more mental problems than could fit in an encyclopedia. She was the only person I ever talked to, she was the only person I ever saw, and even worse, it was the one that paid Sean to come down to my house with a gun and try to kill my entire family. Josie was the only person in these last 2 years that had orchestrated any of this. From all the fake kidnappings and boyfriend drama, to faking the death of someone I had fallen in love with and bringing him back just to screw with my head? Who the hell does that? All the events of the last 2 years came flooding into my mind as I realized in each and every one, it was solely her and no one else but her. So many questions raced through my head, the least of all being why me? I deleted my MySpace and made my Facebook private. I only accept friends that I knew are real. I fell completely off the wagon and out of my head. Drugs, alcohol, and more drugs. That's all I could do to cope. Here I was, a gay man that had unknowingly fallen in love with a straight woman, and regardless of whether or not I thought it was a gay man, which I wholeheartedly did, that shot still fucks you in the head pretty bad. I didn't think I could ever be close to someone again. My world had been rocked and ruined. To this day, all these years later, I still do not trust people. I don't think I will ever be able to trust someone ever again. Can you blame me? She came down here. Yup, you heard me right, that B***Tisich moved into my sister town not even half an hour away from me. I bumped into her by accident and we started talking. Again, as much as I wanted to stomp her in a bloody pulp on the ground, you catch more flies with honey. I wanted answers, hell, I deserved them. I told her I was just trying to forgive her and I needed answers to my questions in order to do so. I asked her if she would sit down with me and tell me everything, and she reluctantly agreed. I politely informed her that this forgiveness was not for her, but it was for me so I could stop holding on to and living in the past. I explained she nearly killed me / ruined my life, and what she did was the most personal and horrific thing one human being can do to another, especially after I was so damn good to her. She was polite and let me get what I needed to get off my chest. I tried to be calm and not rude so she wouldn't run away, and I did get closure somewhat and answers to everything. Here's her explanation. Take it with a grain of salt. It started out as a joke when she was in high school. There was a girl who was being mean to her and bullying her, so she thought she'd get her back by getting her to like a guy online and reveal the awful truth later. She had made a bunch of prototype profiles and eventually almost 20 profiles in total, so it looked like this group of people had the same friends and they were real. She just pulled pictures off of freaking Google. She knew none of these people in real life. She was having a good old time tricking this girl, when along comes a spider to mess up her web. She said she thought she would just mess with me a bit and let me know she was actually a girl, but after talking to me she unintentionally fell in love with me. Whether that's true or not, what to believe. If she really did love me, then why put me through pure freaking hell for 2 years? She said she wanted to tell me 1,000,000 times, but it just got out of control, and before she knew it she was really getting into being these people and somewhat believed she was them and they were real. Again, this chick is the world's best bullshitter I've ever met, so who knows what the truth really is. All I wanted to know was how did she get the music and how did she sound like a guy on the phone. The music, as she shockingly demonstrated to me, was actually hers. She's an amazing pianist and guitar player. I saw this with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears. Zachary's voice on the phone wasn't very complicated. Paid a guy friend a few bucks to be in on it, which this jerk-off eagerly agreed to. Ruining someone's life for a few bucks? How sweet. Sean was all her. She paid him $500 to do that and she had zero explanation as to why. She knew he would do it, he's just as much a psycho as she is. The rest of it was pure fantasy and imagination. All dolled up to be extra crazy so I would care more about Zachary and give her more attention. As lie after lie was finally revealed and the truth brought to life, I had heard enough after around 8 hours of this. I'd heard everything I really ever needed to hear and wanted to. My life was nearly destroyed, my family nearly killed, my mental and emotional health left scarred forever and ever simply because she wasn't getting enough attention in her life. Neither was I when all that started, but I didn't go about like a human wrecking ball trying to make myself feel better. I'll never be able to comprehend or understand the mind of someone like that. People who derive pleasure from other people's pain and misery. I'll never be able to fully trust, not in the way that's required of a true partner and companion. I just can't do that again. If I'm mortally betrayed again, I know the next time will kill me. So as I write this in my apartment a little over a decade after it all happened, I'm alone. One good thing did come from this. It sure as hell made me the person I am today, and it strengthened and toughened my resolve into tempered steel. I learned to be okay with myself and to finally love myself after so many years of self-loathing. I'm a pretty amazing person. I don't need a man to define my life and who I am in any shape, form, or fashion. Obviously, I'm worth something, otherwise this psycho chick wouldn't have latched onto me for years and ended up moving 8 hours away from her home to be 30 minutes away from me all this damn time. What she stole, I will never get back, but what I gained, she can never take away from me again. Story 6. Stalked in the Woods. I posted this in Missing 411 and in my planning of my upcoming camping trips felt the urge to post it here. Mostly a copy and paste with an update on one of the family members. This may be a ramble of thoughts, but after recently stumbling on this sub I finally felt a place I could offer something that my family and I experienced a few years ago that to this day gives me a shiver. I have been camping, solo backpacking and hunting my whole life in Oregon, and felt comfortable in the woods and have a deep respect for nature. A few years ago my wife, daughter and 2 German shepherds went camping north of Mt. Jefferson, Oregon. I have included the coordinates of our campsite, which we found to be the perfect setup for us and our 2 dogs who need privacy since they are intimidating to other dog owners and can be loud when spooked. It was not an established campsite, just a nice horseshoe off a USFS road that had flat ground full trees and a fire pit. The first night my daughter wanted to sleep by herself in a 2-man tent right next to ours. It was maybe 2 feet away from me and my wife's tent. We made the male German shepherd sleep, Guts is his name, with her in the tent. That whole first night neither my wife and I could sleep. We both heard footsteps and they were heavy, not like typical forest critters scampering around the night. I was well armed because I was paranoid from reading recently before departing about a dad in California who was shot and killed in a tent next to his 2 infant daughters. Needless to say, both my wife and I had 2 pistols and my rifle with me. The dogs are great at detection, and that is why I felt my daughter could sleep alone, because Guts is completely fearless and nothing would lay a hand on her without a battle to the death. All in all, nothing but bad vibes and loud footsteps occurred that night, which I ultimately decided was deer or maybe some elk. Day 2. Morning. We go for a walk down the road and maybe 300 feet away see the circle area in the photo. I see an abandoned road where a rusted gate post, gate was missing, was covered in vegetation. Something of blue color caught my eye and Guts immediately took off running down this abandoned road. My heart begins to race because I thought it was another family camping like us and he was going to get himself shot or scare some innocent people to death, so I chase after him as fast as I can and the rest follow. He stops after 20 feet into the road and me yelling his name, but I have covered just enough distance to see that there is nobody there and something is off about the sight. I yell, "Hello, is anyone there? Sorry about the dog." I got no response. My curiosity gets the best of me and I have to see what the sight conditions are. As I got closer, I knew something was wrong. It had all the necessities for a campsite, including a cooler, propane burner, tent, blankets, folding table, but every single item had been completely destroyed, smashed, and torn from what appeared to be claw marks. We all walked around in circles, puzzled why anyone would leave all their camping gear behind, including an expensive REI tent. I figured, well, someone left in a hurry and animals got to the rest as the only logical explanation. Still, a propane tank and cooler were flattened by something, and it certainly wasn't a snowpack with tree coverage in that spot. As the afternoon rolls in, me and my daughter are playing bocce ball at the campsite and my wife goes walking maybe 70 foot north to do her business. I do not have direct line of sight on her, but all of a sudden I see Guts make a mad dash straight towards her. Normally he would always be with me unless he was called over and she didn't call for him. His speed and focus caught my attention and I knew something weird was happening, so I ran over there and my wife started jogging at me and I immediately drew my pistol. Guts had completely continued running into the forest another 100 feet before I called him and he stopped. My other dog Leah, who never misses the opportunity to be the pack leader, is not taking points. I have had her for 7 years now and this was the first time in her life she refused to leave my daughter's side. She was fully raised and attached to us at the hip. Again, anytime we hike or play, Leah is up front bossing everything in her path and pauses to look to see where we are and continues. I asked my wife what happened and she said, "I was trying to pee and all of a sudden I felt all my hairs rise. I know someone was watching me, and then I saw Guts running towards me and I just got up to move towards you." We spent 10 minutes looking for signs of anything and saw no trails, broken branches, nothing to point to what and where something went. We decide we are spending one more night since it's too late to pack up and drive, but we will all be in the big tent together. Before we go to bed, I put a rope with a makeshift coin alarm around the perimeter of our campsite. I used a mint can and some coins and keys from our truck and zip-tied it so anything hitting the rope gave a little jingle. Very unsophisticated, but it put my wife at ease. As I go to tie my last corner off at a tree near our tent, our third mystery item unveils itself. It looks like someone has done the same exact thing I have done with a rope that was so old and brown I didn't see it at first. It was broken and only a few pieces remained, but sure enough it was tied at roughly the same height, 8-10 in off the ground, and even had a few rusted washers on it. I immediately felt someone has stayed here before and put the same makeshift warning system on the same tree I am maybe 10 to 15 years ago based on the condition of the rope. Perhaps my paranoia has now reached a new height, but I had to make sure the girls felt we are safe, and at the time the only thing I could think of was when the evening came around I made them sit in the truck and I fired a clip of my .45 into the dirt as a signal to whatever was out there that we are armed. I reassured the girls that anybody listening to that now knows we have 2 wolves and are armed and we are too risky of a target so we can sleep safely. That night we heard no footsteps and the dogs never perked up and barked. We left early the next morning. Fast forward to today and I watched the Amazon Missing 411 Hunted documentary and I noticed the cluster smack dab close to where we camped that weekend and a flood of dread rushes me as I think of that mysterious abandoned campsite with the ripped tent and smashed cooler and cooktop. We have been camping since and have enjoyed the beauty of the NW, but there was something there at that place that possibly took or harmed someone else less than 300 feet away from where we camped, and we all thank our lucky stars Guts was doing his thing so well that afternoon. Story 7. I bet there's a body in the trunk. I've never posted anything here before, and this feels kind of tame compared to some of the things here, but it still haunts me to this day. This happened when I was a teenager, around 14 or 15 in high school. I had a boyfriend at the time who lived a fairly short walk from the school, and we would often walk to his place after school ended and hang out for a few hours before I went home. Because we took the same route so often, I knew all the houses and landmarks on the way. In January, I live in the north so the winter is pretty cold and snowy, my boyfriend and I started to notice a car that had been parked in the same spot for a while. We thought nothing of it at the time. Maybe the car had died in the cold and whoever owned it couldn't afford to have it repaired. But as spring came and the snow melted, The car was still there. Parked in the same spot at the end of my boyfriend's street, we passed it almost every day as we walked there after school. And as the days grew warmer, a rotten stench started to rise from the car. I joked to my boyfriend, "I bet there's a body in the trunk," and we laughed it off. But we were curious now, so one day we peered inside the car windows as we passed. The car was messy but not filled with trash or food. A discarded backpack lay across the seat, and papers were strewn here and there. It just looked like any ordinary car, except we knew that it hadn't moved for months, and the smell was indescribable. The smell continued to get worse as the spring turned to summer. One day when I couldn't come over for some reason, my boyfriend and his dad decided to investigate the car. They found that the doors were unlocked and the keys were inside the car. That was pretty strange. They went around to the back and popped open the trunk. My boyfriend told me that a swarm of black flies flew up from inside. The smell was definitely coming from the trunk. Inside were a bunch of black garbage bags. My boyfriend and his dad called the cops at this point. The cops later told us that inside of those bags was rotting meat, cut into pieces. The first pieces of meat they tested belonged to a pig. But a few weeks later, my boyfriend's dad got another call. Under the pig meat were the bones of a human child. Whoever left that car sitting unlocked, with the keys inside, was obviously hoping the car would be stolen. It still gives me the shivers. Story 8. Strawberry milk with a side of mercury. This happened a long time ago when I was younger and I have really bad memories. This is just me recounting the memory to the best of my ability and what I was told. I also want to preface the story that this story takes place somewhere in Indonesia, where it's more commonplace to have maids in your household. When I was younger, I had a strong relationship with my extended family. To me, it was normal to be close with your extended family. And when I mean extended, I don't even know how they're related to me. In particular, I was close with my grandaunt's family, calling her Grandaunt Sheila, whose daughters/in-laws were like my big sisters. Being the eldest child, I liked being babied by them since I was always expected to be the big sister for my little brother. This is important for later. I was maybe 11 years old or younger, neither my parents nor I could remember exactly what happened. I just want to say, as a kid I loved milk. I still do, though I tend to stick with skim milk now. When I was younger, I had a favorite local brand that had the usual strawberry flavor. The brand was called Ultra Milk. It was always cool that I was drinking something pink. Unbeknownst to my parents, a gift basket had showed up at our doorsteps and the maids had taken the gift, thinking it was a present from one of my mother's friends. My parents had even seen the gift basket and didn't think much of it. It was full of fruit, sweets, etc., the usual kind you would send to someone maybe on a special occasion. It should have been weird that there wasn't a special occasion, but another weird part was that usually gift baskets had a card or something to indicate where it had come from, but there was no indication from who it came from, but the maids had overlooked it and my parents didn't notice at the time. They had assumed the head maid had checked it through. She didn't. In the gift basket there was my favorite tiny carton of my favorite milk, even strawberry flavored. I had lessons with a tutor and oftentimes, the maid accompanying me to the lesson would bring me snacks or food since the tutoring would take a few hours. I was at my tutor's house and she was teaching me about the homework I got today, when I got thirsty and I got my carton of milk to take a sip out of it. I was ready to take a sip of the extremely sweet artificially flavored strawberry milky goodness, but something was wrong. It didn't taste right. I don't remember what it tasted like, but I knew that it was wrong. I remember describing to my parents that it felt like I licked the bottom of a foot of a metal-framed chair I had in my room at my desk. It just tasted awful. Thinking that maybe it was spoiled, my mom had warned me about drinking spoiled milk and how it can really upset your stomach. I immediately, without swallowing, I grabbed some tissues at the table and spat out the mouthful into the tissue and was surprised to see sort of weird metallic beads in it. Like metal, but it was liquid. I have never seen anything like it, and I was confused. It looked a lot like this. My tutor was even more confused and horrified that I just spat out a strange metallic substance from my mouth. I didn't really understand what was going on, but my tutor asked to take the carton of milk where I had tried to drink from and told me to just continue working while she went to investigate. Apparently my tutor and her head maid went outside and poured a bit more of the milk into a tissue and there was more of this weird metal liquid in there. She asked me if I had drunk any of it, and I told her that maybe I took a sip and swallowed before I realized that something bad was in there. After that, my tutor apparently called my mom and told her that I had been possibly poisoned. I went home without finishing my lesson, becoming slightly concerned that maybe something was wrong. I went home and I don't really remember what happened after that. There wasn't a poison center in my country and no emergency services that would really respond, third world country and all that. So my parents took me to a doctor to have blood tests. I remember being pulled out of school. My mom wanted me to stay home from school for the next few days, which was great for me. No one told me the severity of the situation, and my mom just told me that she just wanted me to chill at home for a while. No school? I get to have fun? No way. So I did. I stayed home and watched Avatar, The Last Airbender on DVD while my parents were fretting over the idea that I might have been poisoned by mercury. The gift basket, which had already been taken apart and stored to eat for later. It was all reassembled and my parents tried to go with this to the police, but they really couldn't do anything since we literally had no leads on where this gift basket came from since it had no card and the police really couldn't care less about our situation. Again, third world country. I don't really know what happened other than I was pretty cool with staying home and playing. My life at home wasn't perfect, got some issues with my parents, but they were really nice to me during this time, so I enjoyed it a lot since I didn't really understand. I think my parents kept a lot of things from me to keep me from getting scared. My parents even took me overseas to Singapore, even taking the liquid found in the carton with them in a tin or whatever to show the doctors there, where I got tested some more and didn't seem to have any signs of poisoning. I didn't swallow enough of it. I'm not sure if it really was mercury, no one has ever told me, but at the end of the day, everyone was glad that I didn't drink enough of it to get affected by whatever it is. Now to get into the suspect part, my parents later told me that they had a sneaking suspicion that it was possible that Grandaunt Sheila was the one who tried to poison me. I didn't know this at the time, but around the time of this incident, Grandaunt Sheila was found to have stolen gold and jewelry from my parents' store for years, worth thousands. My parents were furious and wanted to report her to the authorities, but my grandma, her sister, loved her too much and instead just cut contact with her. Since then, Grandaunt Sheila had seemed to want to enact vengeance over being caught and has been trying to get back at us. My mom had warned me that I couldn't play with the big sisters, Grandaunt Sheila's daughters, anymore since they did something very bad, and to never get into a car with them if they showed up at my school, but it didn't click in my mind until now. Thinking back, Grandaunt Sheila was close enough to me to know that I loved drinking milk and maybe tried to hurt my family, even if it meant hurting her grandniece. Not sure what I would be to her. We could never confirm if it was her, but Grandaunt Sheila has continued to be a thorn in my family's side for years now, though my parents have learned a lesson and ensured that whenever we received a gift basket, there had to be a name on it. My grandmother doesn't believe her sister did it though, but my parents firmly believe that she was responsible, but we had no proof other than her horrible character. We've received weird gifts like black seeds and hair that was supposedly some sort of witchcraft thing. Witchcraft and sorcery is a popular thing in Indonesia, believe it or not. We assumed that this was all from Grandaunt Sheila, who still lived in the same city as us. It only made sense. My parents never bought me the Ultramilk brand again, which I was okay with since that moment spoiled the Ultramilk brand to me. I was reminded of this story while drinking strawberry milk the other day. I'm no longer living in Indonesia, not in the same country as Grandaunt Sheila. Even so, to Grandaunt Sheila or whoever was the one who tried to spike a carton of strawberry milk to poison an 11-year-old girl, let's not meet.